Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today at this RenWeb sponsored webinar. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm, and we're pleased to have you with us. This is part of the Firestorm 2017 Crisis Coach webinar series. Today we're discussing the accidental insider. We'd like to have you become our friend. Facebook, we're Firestorm Solutions. You can follow us on Twitter at Firestorm Soul. Yes, there is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We'd like to remind you the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. This work product should be discussed in accordance with advice from your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. RenWeb has been our sponsor of this webinar series for several years now. We're delighted to have them as our host and co-sponsor. You can go to firestorm.com, watch past webinars in this series, and register for upcoming webinars. Karen Masullo, our very own Executive Vice President in charge of social media, is going to be our presenter today. And we're going to just go right over to you, Karen.
I am very sorry for the little delay there. Hi, everybody. I work in an office from my home, and we have a large barred owl in our backyard. And my dog has just spotted it and has been barking at it really loudly while Bill was talking. And so I completely apologize. My dog would like to get the barred owl, and I think if she did, she'd be in a lot of trouble, because I don't know if you've ever seen one, but they're really big. So hi and welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today. I know many of you are here via our sponsor for this session, which is RenWeb, which does some terrific school software that helps you run all administrative tasks for a school. And I recognize it is summertime, and so many of you are taking time out from your school schedules, and appreciate that. For those of you who came in through a general invitation from Firestorm, welcome. Happy to have you. And if you'd like to take advantage of any of the assessments or anything else we offer, just email us at webinars@firestorm.com and let us know that you attended the RenWeb session, and that way we will be able to support you in your request. If you have any questions during this session, you can use the GoToWebinar little toolbar. I think it should be on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a little chat feature in there, and you can ask a question. And if we don't get to it today, we certainly will reach out and email you back and try to respond to any questions you have. If you hear my dog in the background, I do apologize. She is a dog. So last month we discussed natural disasters and what keeps you up at night. And today we're going to really talk about man-made disasters. So human, we have a problem. You know, throughout our sessions, we ask survey questions to get a feel for where our attendees are on a spectrum of feeling that their organizations are prepared. And then certainly present those back to you. And also this year we'll have a paper at the end of the year where we can give you all of that information back in a much more analytical form. But we surveyed about 1,000 people, and we said, have your employees been trained on phishing specifically? And 48% of the folks said yes, their employees had. However, those persons who were unsure, which is as good as a no, and those persons who said no were more than 48%. They were 52%. So if 52% of employees out there in organizations are not being trained at all on a risk like phishing, how can we possibly expect them to conduct safe computing or safe technology at work. So I think that's a really important point for us to look at. Next, we asked folks, could you then, if you had a crisis, could you contain the leaks in a crisis? Could you contain what was going on? And again, if you combine those and the unsures, because an I don't know is good as a no, we suddenly have 80% of folks that responded to this particular survey saying, honestly, we don't know if we could contain information leaks in a crisis. We just don't know. And that's a true answer. And I think it's a great starting place for us. Now, let's look at this. The people in our organization would never do anything unethical that might jeopardize our survival. 43% of the folks said that's absolutely true. The people in our organization would never do anything unethical. But the combined 29% and 28% are the I don't know and I'm not sure. So I think it's important that we recognize throughout this whole session the returning theme that we are going to come back to is that training is critical in order to improve our chances of surviving during some sort of a breach of confidential data and information. And many times that breach that happens is completely accidental, and because it's accidental, we don't find out about it until too late, because our employees are afraid that by admitting something has happened, they will jeopardize their jobs. So training is critical to help people understand. We understand that bad stuff happens, but let's not make it worse by compounding the problem by not letting anyone know one exists. This is a graphic that I found that I thought was very interesting. This is from a Debrief webcast. Debrief is a Deloitte consulting series that is done. And this documented, this was from last year in 2016, and the numbers have stayed pretty consistent. This documented the spread of insider threats. And I'm not going to go through this whole chart with you. It will be included in the post-session brief that you can download from our website probably next Monday or Tuesday once we have it transcribed. But you'll have this information and all of the other slides as well and images from the slides. But this helps you really look at sort of this time wheel of things that you can look for that might indicate that there is an issue, and how employees who are anonymously reported use or have accessed confidential information. So I think it's important that you're aware of it and know that things like 51% of employees involved in an insider threat had a history previous to that of violating IT security policies. So they're bringing in their own software, they're downloading software on the web, they're not letting anybody know when there has been a problem, they're opening suspect documents, etc. So we want to be aware of that, and again, that'll be included in the brief after the session. So what exactly are we talking about here today? Well, today we're talking about accidental insider compromises when we don't know something has happened, or a little bit of when we actually do know something has happened, but it came about because of a situation we couldn't avoid. So we're going to talk about phishing. We're going to talk about interesting ways data leaks out. We're going to look at what we're posting on social media. We're going to look at how we make sure that employees no longer have access to sensitive documents, databases, and internal systems like email. And we're also going to look at what happens when people are just browsing around the office or the web and find interesting information that they think they need to share with the world. Now, just to give a high-level overview of what breaches look like today, the source for this is through a company called Gemalto, and they have a website you can go to any time of the day or night at any moment called breachlevelindex.com, and you can see what the most recent data breach was that day or month, and they put together some really good, easy-to-understand stats, statistics, and assign them a risk score. It's a good resource to use in your own organization. So if we look at some of these most recent ones from March, we can see that there is, if you look about halfway down on the slide, you'll see it shows the source, a malicious outsider, or in two cases, one was a malicious insider, that was at New Oriental, and at Saks Fifth Avenue, it's called an accidental loss, and that can be a number of things. And so in these four situations, 50% of them technically, came from an insider or accidental operation. As we look through March a little bit earlier in the month, we see an accidental loss at the GMO payment gateway. Then we have a malicious outsider in the two middle situations. And then the National Health Service, as you know, which was infected severely with ransomware, WannaCry, that came from a fish originally, that ransomware. So that came from a malicious insider I thought that came from the fish. Maybe I'm incorrect. But they're crediting that to a malicious insider. So what we'd like you to consider, and again, this is still from breachlevelindex.com, is that over the past few years, these numbers have stayed pretty steady. And what the numbers have shown us are that about 28% of the compromises of our company data come from a combination of malicious insider threats or accidental losses. So that combined is really almost 30% of where our data is being touched. So we think if something's happening 30% of the time and nobody's being trained on anything, that we better start addressing at least that 30%. If I told you that just through some simple training, you could improve your chances of not having compromised data or leaked data by 30%, isn't that something you'd want to do? Of course it is. So let's start here. Let's sit down and talk to your employees about phishing. So we know that most people haven't been training their folks on phishing. So let's talk about the basics of phishing. The basics of phishing are the same as the basics of catfishing. We know there are a lot of people on the web looking for love, and we know that there are a lot of people doing what's called catfishing, where you pretend you're someone else and you're really just trying to get money out of the person. It's quite an industry in some areas. Not to disparage Nigeria, but we've seen a lot of scams come out of that area of the world. And the science of this has gotten pretty sophisticated. So this is a bit more old school in this particular one. And if you just read the first line, you should hit delete. This says, I have a quite delicate question which touches directly to you. Okay, that's not how anybody speaks, and you might say, all right, well, it's possible this is one of my international colleagues, and maybe their English is not quite as strong. Don't be surprised from where I learned about you. The matter is that I have received already a third letter from the person, unknown to me, which asserts that you are fraud involved. At this point in time, we have got to understand that somebody needs to be hitting the delete key or forwarding this email that comes in through the company system to whomever is over the email system in IT so that they can be aware that this got through the spam filter. And not only did it get through the spam filter, but we know there are people in our organization that are going to click something and do something. And that at least gives our technology folks, our email administrators, the time to send a message or a memo out to everyone with a screenshot that says, if you see this, don't do anything with it. Delete it. Get rid of it. So here's another one on the left. You can see now we're getting a little more sophisticated. We're using, the actual email that we may have received from a provider, from someone like Verizon or a bank, and just copying that so it looks really authentic. As a matter of fact, many of the more sophisticated phishes today will keep the internal links to, let's say it's Citibank, and they'll go ahead and keep the internal links to Citibank so that as you're scrolling through the email and scrolling over links, you say, oh, well, it really does link back to Citibank. However, the one place here where it says click here to verify your account, that's the one place where they're actually going to be sending you to their malicious site that looks just like Citibank, but is designed to do only one thing, and that is to get your personal identification so that they can empty all of your savings and checking and debit accounts. So how do you spot a phish? There are three big kinds of phishing, not including catfishing, and there's spear phishing. And spear phishing is a very targeted form of phishing that hones in on a specific group of individuals or an organization. So it may be around a common cause, but it's going after a specific group. Whaling is an outcropping of spear phishing, and we see this a lot on LinkedIn, especially when we see very specific, a lot of times adult-oriented material or adult-oriented phishes that are geared at executives who the phishers assume have high dollar investments somewhere. So they'll use male and female adult-oriented material to lure people in out of curiosity. They'll also use greed, or they will use the under the guise of a disgruntled or very angry client or partnering firm. So we have to be very careful because LinkedIn is a really ripe group, and I love LinkedIn, but it's ripe for this type of activity. So that's whaling, where they target executive-level individuals. And then there's cloning, where that legitimate email is duplicated, but as I mentioned, some of the content is replaced with bogus links or attachments. So good thing to show your employees and, again, to talk to them about. And here's an example. This carried, I didn't have quite enough room, but it carried a very official-looking Microsoft logo. And it said, caution, there's unusual sign-in activity on your account. We detected something unusual about a recent sign-in to your Microsoft account, gives you the country and the details. Now, for a lot of us, we understand what two-factor authentication is. We understand how to make sure one device tells another device when there's been a login, but not all of our employees may have those kinds of things set up. So when they see something like this come through, they may get frightened or nervous and go ahead and please check out the document for further instructions. We have got to be telling people Microsoft is never, ever, ever going to tell you to click a document for further instructions in an email. Not going to happen. No one is going to do that. And we do not want people opening documents that are from unknown sources. Even our own internal sources can be a risk. This particular phish contained a ransomware, and it was used to then redirect whomever clicked on this bogus document to a very odd page that showed a Google Chrome browser installation. So it basically said, to view this document, we need you to download Google Chrome, or update your current version of Google Chrome. So people are like, oh, God, I guess I have to do this, and they would click that. At that point, it would say, click here to download Chrome, and what actually would happen is the Chrome_update.exe executable file. We must train our employees that they must never, ever to download a .exe file that is an executable file. And it then launched the server ransomware application. And at that point in time, it basically rendered the user's computer useless. Because what happens next is you see a ransomware message on the screen. So let's stop here right now and everyone think, if tomorrow when you get up and you go to your computer and you turn it on to check for emails so you can start your day or to look at your calendar, if you see a message that says, hey there, if you pay me $150, I'll go ahead and give you your computer back, what would you do? It's important, because if it's one of those days where you can go into IT and talk to IT about it, good. But if you're on the road, if you're traveling, if you have a presentation in 20 minutes, if you have a critical meeting with your CEO and your most important client, do you really want to have to go tell your CEO that your data just got held for ransom? Hopefully you have a backup somewhere. Hopefully you have an alternate method that you thought through. Okay, if that ever happens and I can't get to my laptop, what else am I going to do? And that's what we want to help you do. We want to help you think through all of these possible scenarios, have a backup to your backup, and then make sure that you're reporting and dealing with the original issue in a way that not only keeps it from happening, but lends itself to a lesson in learning for your entire organization. And it happens at every level in an organization, from the most recent part-time employee hired to do some filing to the CEO. A Snapchat CEO accidentally leaked all employee pay data after an email scam. And what had happened was the CEO got an email that said someone in the organization needed such and such information. The CEO then sent the email to his payroll person and said, you know, hey, XYZ payroll person, can you go ahead and make sure this is taken care of? Well, if my CEO sends me an email, I jump on it pretty quickly because he's the boss. And so I might not even check and see unless it looks like there's some sort of confidential information. Now, if at Firestorm, if my CEO wrote me and said, Karen, I need you to send so-and-so this information, my next email is back to him as a confirmation. Jim, I'm just confirming you want me to send the XYZ file to this person. It takes 2 seconds. It's the simplest thing you can do, and it just makes sure, just in case, that sensitive information doesn't leave your organization. I'm not suggesting you do that for every normal occurrence that happens throughout the day, but you know when something comes across your desk that is just unusual. Through this and other CEO scams, what we've seen the general language to be is, if Bill Baker's on our call today, Bill's our moderator, I might send an email to Bill, and that email might say, Bill, this is really confidential information. I can't have you share this with anybody because we're going through a merger and acquisition with a ABC company. I need you to send all of our confidential accounts payable information to this address so that we can move forward with the M&A. Again, I need your confidentiality on this. Well, if Bill sees that coming in from me, he might say, oh, it's confidential, I understand. Knowing Bill, he would write me and he'd say, Karen, are you sure this is what you need me to do? Or I would write Bill and say, Bill, are you sure this is what I should be doing? But a lot of organizations, we're moving so quickly, that doesn't happen. So we want to make sure that we're checking to make sure the validity of the request is real. Aaron Higbee is the co-founder. Oops, I just did the wrong thing there. I've got a touch screen and I touched the screen. Aaron Higbee is the co-founder and CTO at fishme.com. Fishme.com is one of those up-and-coming businesses out there today that help with your security. And their stats show that more than 90% of the phishing emails that they analyzed now contain ransomware. So pretty much all of them, because ransomware is just a really great way to go ahead and move your objective forward. They keep the numbers small, they do hundreds of thousands of them, and they make a lot of money as crooks. All right, enough about phishing. Let's talk about leaks. Now that we've had some problems with our fishes, what's getting leaked out there? Well, this is a pretty high-profile case, and I don't know that this young lady realized what she was doing was going to indeed cause her to be arrested. But reality lay winner is a young person. She has very specific political viewpoint, and she felt it was in the best interest of the country that she leaked some documentation to a media outlet called The Interceptor. Again, we have to be working with our employees so that they understand this is not a little thing. This is not, oh, I just handed some information to somebody because I thought it was interesting. Because I think I am, it's almost a man of La Mancha sort of attitude without understanding the full picture. She has put herself in a significantly life-changing situation. So that's when someone is intentionally going after information and leaking it out. What happens when it's completely unintentional? Not too long ago, a Boeing employee inadvertently leaked the personal information of 36,000 co-workers. And so Boeing had to notify all of their employees, gee, we're really sorry, but all of your personal sensitive data got leaked, and we don't know where it is right now. Because the person who leaked it accidentally grabbed the wrong file when he was making an attachment to an email to his wife. So now it's in his wife's business's email system, and sent her a company spreadsheet that had the payroll and other sensitive information on 36,000 employees, including places of birth, their sensitive employee ID numbers, their social security numbers, accounting department codes, all kinds of information. So that was a real field day for somebody who was going to intercept that or could have intercepted that. His wife probably didn't know what she was getting. She didn't know what to do with it. As soon as she opens it, she's party to it. So we really have to be careful. And again, it's because we're moving so fast, right? We're moving really fast. We're grabbing information. I seem to have a lot of Kathys in my address book. And there are two specific people who, fortunately, I've never emailed them, either of them, any sensitive information. But one of them invariably will write me and say, I think you meant this for the other Kathy. They actually know each other now because I have accidentally emailed one or the other. So I had to actually change the construct of their names in my address book so that I would stop doing this to these poor ladies. But what if we did have confidential or sensitive information? We all need to be a little more cautious and a little more careful. This was a printing company, a PIP printing company. They accidentally leaked thousands of highly sensitive documents. They didn't realize they had done it. And these documents were really, really sensitive. They included contracts of high-profile NFL players and other high-profile people from the entertainment world. They included lawsuit actions. They included personnel file accusations of sexual harassment that were leading to suits or settlements, highly confidential information. And the owner of PIP said that the breach appeared to stem from a third party. A lot of our breaches are going to come from third parties. IT firm that accidentally misconfigured the backup protocols, essentially leaving a backdoor open in the system. I don't know how many of you on the call, I don't know how many of your eyes sort of glaze over when someone says, well, I accidentally misconfigured the backup protocols, because we're not really quite sure what that means. And so how are we going to check it? So we need to have someone in a technology position who can check the work of our contractors, of others who are working on our materials, so that we know that we're actually getting what we pay for and we're secure. We had a webinar this morning on this subject, and we have a webinar series we do that's supported by the Association of Continuity Professionals and the Rochester Chamber of Commerce. And the president of the Eastern Great Lakes Association of Contingency Professionals was a little late to the call because she was dealing with a client who had been going through exactly what we're talking about. And in an audit with one of her clients, they found out that all of the information they'd been getting back, that all of the stress testing and all of the other testing they've done on their systems was A-OK. They had zero spam, zero phishing that had occurred. And that raised Dr. Redmond's red flag, because it's impossible that it's at zero. And they found out that the vendor had been saying they were in 100% compliance, but actually hadn't been doing anything at all for them. So they had a completely false sense of security and a vendor who was breaking the law and their contract. So we also want to look at the other side of things. If the world looks a little too rosy, that should raise our suspicions as well. This is one of the memoranda that was leaked, and I think you can see if that were about you, you'd probably be a little bit upset as well. Now we're going to move on to, well, would you look at that confidential information that's out there in the wild. How did it get there in the wild? Our employees. This is from a client. I've redacted as much as I can, and this is from someone who is a shipping and receiving clerk at a client. And this person worked a late shift and was quite often at her desk alone in the evening and would get bored. And so she would play a song and then video and post that on Instagram, the song or whatever she was eating, and she would talk to her family and followers via Instagram. And every time she did it, she would show her screen in the background. Now, we've blurred this out, but I can tell you that not only the paper in front of her, next to her pop can, and on the screen there is confidential client and company information. And she didn't do it just once in a while. It's like almost every night. And she never realized how much confidential information she was sharing with the world. And this is quite often the way we see it happen. Here's another one. The Magic's off-season plans were leaked, or may have been leaked, in one of their agents' Twitter photos. And this is what happened. Someone took a photo of this person, and in the background on the whiteboard was sensitive planning for the Magic schedule. Well, how many times have you sat in your offices and everybody's having some birthday cake? In the background is that whiteboard with the sensitive plans or the sensitive next steps of a project or a task. We have to train our employees. You've got to look at the full picture of the picture you take to assure that there's nothing that has to be blurred out or redacted in that image. And they've got to do that, and it's something very important to teach. You know, here's another example of when something like this happens in a little bit of a different way. This happened in 2015. It was pretty significant at the time. An Uber driver noticed that when he went to upload a document, his driver's documents, to the Uber application to his profile as requested, for some reason, if you did a certain combination of actions, which was an error, he could suddenly see the documents and driver information of every Uber driver in the system. And instead of going to technology or someone within the company and saying, hey, I just, was able to view all of the information on everybody, I think that's a problem, he went to Reddit and posted screenshots on Reddit. Reddit, if you don't know what it is, Reddit is where everybody goes to do that kind of stuff. That's, I guess, the best thing I can tell you. Reddit calls itself the front page of the Internet. And so all of the other Reddit drivers on Uber then jumped in to see if they could recreate the error, and a lot of the data was stolen. All right, this is something specifically that makes me crazy. It's the whole reason I wanted to do this session. Many years ago, I worked for the world's largest career transition firm, and we helped downsize companies that had 10,000 or 15,000 employees. And the challenge in doing that is that you really have to understand how long it takes to process that many people out of your system. So let's even look at it at its most simple. Let's say in your company you have the company email, and then maybe you have 2 extra databases that people access. Maybe one is the Dropbox, and then maybe another one is the cloud or SharePoint or some other way of getting to external documents so you can all collaborate. Maybe it's through your website. Maybe it's an employee benefits site. How long do you think it takes to shut off access, either by changing the username and password or by deleting the employee from your files? Well, if it takes even 2 or 3 minutes per database for one employee, you have 5 databases to get them out of. That's 15 minutes. Multiply that times 1,000 employees. That's how much time you have to build into the transitioning exercise. You have to build that extra time in. And then, get this, I'm going to take you outside of the PowerPoint for just a minute to an article from Microsoft. This article, if you go ahead and just do a search, I use Google, use the search engine of choice, and just type in, how long does it take to remove an employee from Office 365? This takes you through how long it takes to remove someone from email and from other Outlook 365 databases, and how to block someone from access. But one thing I want you to see, and the reason I showed you the exact web page, is because it says blocking an account can take up to 24 hours to take effect. How much damage can someone do in 24 hours if they've just been terminated from their position and are not happy about it? And if they're technologically savvy, they are going to take advantage of this particular loophole. It can take more than an hour just to shut off their email, especially if they're in the email box at the time. If they're in their email frantically trying to save documents, you can change the password all day long. Until they refresh their browser or refresh the application, they're going to be able to have access to it no matter what you do. So this is a really good article to read, a really good article to discuss with your management team when you're talking about continued safety and security. So let's look at what happens when we don't do it correctly. In this situation, we had a fired IT employee who blocked all access to all of their Google accounts. And your Google accounts can run your advertising. You may have pay-per-click ads. You have Google Analytics, your Google Webmaster account, All of these accounts assure the search engine optimization and correct analytics and running of your primary websites. Well, this guy said, sure, I'll be happy to give you the password to that if you give me $200,000. Does anybody on this call have $200,000 to do that with today? And you can take them to court. You could figure out some other ways to do what it is you need to do. How long is that going to take? Do you have a plan for that? Have you ever sat around with your management team and said, you know, what would happen if our CTO walked out the door today with all the passwords? What would we do? It's a good thing to talk about, even if the CTO is in the room, because the CTO will tell you exactly how they would do it. We have a lot of other examples, and again, you can read these when you download the brief. But disgruntled employees will cause a lot of havoc, and almost half of employees surveyed recently from Jordan Lawrence, Understanding Insider Threats, says that almost 40% of employees surveyed kept confidential corporate data after leaving or losing a job, and that they plan to use that data in their next job. So make sure you're only sharing passwords and data with an employee, what the employee needs to do their job. So keep that as sectioned off as possible. Ensure your employees, I don't know how long we have to say this, ensure logins are strong, randomized passwords. I'm sorry it's inconvenient. I'm sorry it's hard to remember. Passphrases are really great. Passphrases might be something like, I graduated college in 1980. Have a mirror on my wall. So I might say mirror 1980 wall, or some other sort of passphrase. My husband likes chocolate turtles. And only something you might know. And you don't use the same username or password construct for every single website, please. Map employees to their access security roles and databases. This is something else. When you have to do a termination, if you don't have an inventory of what these people have access to, how are you going to deprovision or cut off their access if you just don't know? I was talking to, this is another reason I wanted to do this session. I was talking to a friend recently over a glass of wine, and I said, gee, I'd really like to understand more about blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, you know, I used to work for a company that did that. Come on, let's go jump in the website. I'll show it to you. And I said, well, wait a minute, isn't that a confidential part of the website? And she said, yeah, but I still have my username and password, and they still work. I said, well, we can't use that. That's not right. And she said, oh, yeah, it is. They would have, if they didn't want me in there, they would have cut off my access. Well, I don't think they know she has access. And everybody says, oh, well, you can look at the logs and see. Is anybody actually looking at those logs to see who signs in or not? Is that the number one priority of somebody's job? Probably not. We need to make sure we're changing passwords for privileged, shared, or critical databases that an ex-employee has access to. Again, I know it's a hassle, but you've got to do it to protect yourself. And do not leave disabled accounts in your systems. It's an invitation for abuse. If someone has left your organization, get rid of the information, get rid of the data, and get them out of the system. And keep an eye on those access and reporting logs to spot any abnormalities. Last, we want to talk about just browsing around. I want you to think about this when you go back to your office and sit down today, maybe with your team. I want you, what would you do if one of your HR managers or another manager in your company came to you and said they accidentally sent highly sensitive information to all employees in the organization or in a location, and the document listed everybody's salary, their bonus schedule, their benefits, and other personal sensitive data? Don't say it will never happen. Let us work from the premise that it happened. And then tell us what you would do, how you would do it, what would you communicate. And if you sit down with your team and work through this kind of information, you're going to start to see where there are weaknesses and strengths in your organization that need to be shored up or reinforced. 72% of employees say they would share sensitive, confidential, or regulated company information under certain circumstances. And the number one circumstance, if their manager told them to do it. Risky business is something that happens in every organization, and that is, I'm sitting at my workstation, I'm dealing with sensitive information, and I need to go get a Snickers bar. And I get up and I go leave my workstation, and I leave a sensitive screen that anyone can see when they walk by. Visitors to our building and others. Someone taking a selfie may accidentally grab that screen in the background and not even realize it. As we close up our session today, I want you to consider roughly 1/3 or 27 to 30% of all incidents are caused by insider actions. Some malicious, some retaliatory sabotage, and others are just accidental. Some sources believe that number to be much higher, but it's hard to document. And in the Verizon 2016 study and the Verizon 2017 study has the first half of 2017 just came out. So the Verizon 2016 study is the best full-year study we've got that shows 30% of phishing messages were opened by a target across all campaigns. So when they tested, 30% of phishing messages were open. We think that number is higher. Some 12% of those victims even went on to click the malicious attachment or a link. It wasn't enough that they got through, they opened the bad email, and they clicked here or there. They actually went forward to move forward with whatever the directions were. So we must ask ourselves, are insider or outsider the bigger threat? And it's a trick question because both are. The pressure to be productive is causing employees to put sensitive data at risk. And this is from Larry Ponemon from the Ponemon Institute. Something really exciting is coming up for the Disaster Recovery Journal in July. They're having Dr. Larry Ponemon talk about the most recent IBM statistics and reports on data breach. So if you get over to the Disaster Recovery Journal website, I'm happy to promote our friend Bob Arnold's webinar with Dr. Ponemon. I think it's going to be a very interesting session. For you, what next to do now that we're done here today? There's a lot of good information. These last couple of slides have some Firestorm-specific information that you can reach out and contact us if you would like help with an informational security audit. And just email us at webinars@firestorm.com. We will treat your request confidentially and set up a 1-hour no-fee meeting for you. Then please download the Accidental Insider Compromise brief of today's session. That will be on our website on probably Tuesday, and we'll be happy if you would take that and share that with your employees and help educate them, just as RenWeb helps our schools educate their students all across the country. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at webinars@firestorm.com. You can give us a call, and you'll get Bill Baker at 321-2219. That's a 1-800 number. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next month. This will end today's session. Have a great day.